Yeah, I'm here from Wilson.
Here we go.
All right. Good morning. My name is Rita Bailey. I'm a registered licensed dietitian at Lourdes Hospital in Paducah. And today the topic we chose is cholesterol. How many of you have had your cholesterol checked when you've gone to the doctor for your physical? And do you remember what it was? Well, for a long time you go to the doctor and he wouldn't even give you what the number was, and he would just tell you it's okay or it's a little high. I'm recommending that you find out that number and you track that yourself. And years ago, we used to tell people their cholesterol was normal if it was between 200 and 300. Unfortunately, those are the same people who ended up having heart attacks and strokes. So based on the statistics, we want your cholesterol to be under 200. Now, what is cholesterol and why is this such an important thing? Well, I brought some examples of that for you. If you've ever done had any plumbing issues at your home, you always tell people do not pour the bacon grease down the drain, correct? And the reason for that is because it will eventually cause a clog. This is what cholesterol does in the body. Now, cholesterol is not actually fat, but it has similar characteristics to fat. It's essential to life. It's made in our own bodies, and it's part of the makeup of the cell walls and the hormones. But if you have too much, just like anything, too much of anything can be bad. It can clog the arteries. It builds up over the years on the inside of the arteries. And you can see that these red blood cells, when we turn this upside down, it shows how they're trying to get through that narrowed artery. And eventually those will kind of clump and they form a clot. And that finishes it off. Then you have total occlusion or blockage of that artery. Now, if that's in the heart, you have a heart attack. If it's in your carotid artery, which is on both sides of your neck and the main source of blood supply to your brain, you would have a stroke. If it's in your feet and legs, it could cause you to lose a leg, cause gangrene and amputation would be necessary. So while we're talking about this, it's obvious. This is another example. This is what we look like at birth. By the time we're in our 20s or 30s, we already have some plaque buildup. Now here's the tricky thing. You can look healthy as all get out and not know what's going on inside of you because you don't have any symptoms or pain from this. It's only when it gets this bad that you start to become symptomatic and you go to the doctor complaining of maybe some chest pain, or if it's a carotid artery, it could be some numbness in your hand or a black curtain coming across and look like you're going blind for a few minutes. That's called transient ischemic attack, or TIAs, or referred to as small or mini strokes, warning that a big stroke could be coming. This is when you do have the heart attack, you have the stroke, or you might have that problem with circulation in the legs and have to have a wound that won't heal and have to have an amputation. So why I come out and talk to healthy people is because we can prevent this. I see, unfortunately, people in the hospital after they have a problem, and it's much better to prevent it than to try to cure it. So cholesterol is the issue, and we've talked about what your numbers need to be, and I would recommend that you check that every year. There are also risk factors involved. You may not be aware of it because a lot of the severe diseases such as cancer, but heart disease is still the #1 killer in our country, and that's true for both women and men. The risk factors for heart disease would include heredity, which we can't do anything about, can't change that. But if you know that you have family members who had heart disease or strokes or any type of circulation problem, that means you also inherited that risk. The aging process, obviously, as we get older, we're all at increased risk. We have more time for this to accumulate. And for a long time, we thought men were at greater risk than women until we go through menopause and then we catch up with them because the hormone changes. But we're seeing more and more women having heart disease at a younger age as well. I think some of that's related to the fact that women are smoking more, they're not quitting as well as men are quitting, and obesity is also a big problem, which is related to heart disease as well. Another risk factor would be, the other category of risk factors would be those that would be considered controllable, and that would be a high cholesterol. That's why I want you to keep up with your cholesterol levels. High blood pressure that's not controlled with medication and diet. And another one, these are the top 3, which is a bad habit. What do you think that one is? It is smoking, yes. So the top 3 controllable risk factors include smoking. Other risk factors would be obesity, diabetes, type personality. We used to call them type A personalities. Anybody have type A besides me in this room? Type A people are real good, conscientious, hard-working, go-getters, never say no to anybody, very stressed and self-induced. Type B are more relaxed individuals and don't push so hard. If you're not exercising, that's a risk factor. A lot of people don't realize that. They think of exercise as probably something they should do. It would be good for them to do it. They just don't get around to it. But you're actually at risk if you're not exercising. And exercising is not a matter of just being a busy person. Exercise is when you get your heart rate up, and they have to be breathing through your mouth and perspiring a little bit. That's the real cardiovascular exercise, which is beneficial. Now, one of the reasons it's beneficial is the effect it has on your cholesterol. Now, it's like all fairy tales. You have two types of cholesterol. You have the good guys and the bad guys. Good cholesterol is called HDL, or high-density lipoprotein. And it's kind of like Drano. It will pick up the cholesterol that's in that bloodstream, take it back to the liver to be excreted. So we want to have a high level of HDL. The LDL is the bad guy. It's the bad cholesterol, and it's the one that does eventually accumulate within the arteries. We want to keep that down. We can do that through diet. Now, another thing that influences HDL, or some of the things that influence HDL, because people always ask, how can I get more HDL? One is by exercising. So again, one of the reasons we want you to exercise on a regular basis, get that heart rate up. And one of the things that hurts or decreases your HDL is that bad habit again, that's smoking. So two known things that you can do to make your HDL better. Another risk factor would be high triglycerides, and they are actually fat. If your blood was taken in the lab and it was put in a little test tube, and they take it down and they put it in a centrifuge which spins it real fast, and it causes these red blood cells to settle to the bottom of that test tube. The serum will be what's left on top. In a normal serum, that looks like apple juice. It's clear. You can look right through it. And in someone who has high triglycerides, it looks like buttermilk or baked custard in some cases. It's very white and sometimes even appears to be solid. So another risk factor. So what can you do about your cholesterol? Well, if it's extremely high, the doctor's probably going to recommend medication for you. That's the best way to get it down if it's in a really, really high category. But if it's just kind of high and you don't want to go to medication yet, we're going to talk about diet and how diet can affect you. And one of the first things that comes to mind is the egg. What part of the egg has the cholesterol in it?
The yolk.
Yeah, just the yolk. So you can eat all the egg whites that you like. Matter of fact, sometimes I'll have eggs at night for a quick, easy supper. And one egg's just not enough for a supper meal to satisfy me. So I will have 3 egg whites with 1 yolk. Then I've got lots of egg. I didn't have to buy anything special. I just throw away those yolks, and I didn't get excess cholesterol. Now, the reason we consider the cholesterol in the egg to be excessive is we recommend that you eat no more than 200 milligrams of cholesterol a day. And 1 egg yolk can have as much as 270. Now, that was the initial analysis. Now they say maybe it's not quite as bad as 220. And we know there are good qualities and properties about the egg, so we're not going to take them away totally. We used to say only eat 2 yolks a week. Now we say as many as 4. But keep in mind that includes what's included in your food. So if you're eating cake or pudding or potato salad and other things that contain egg, that also counts. And what a lot of people do will say, I will eat 3 eggs a week. I'll have one on Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. The other one will be what I get in my food. A lot of times when I'm baking and the recipe calls for 3 eggs, I will leave out 2 of the yolks and just maybe put 1 in there. You can leave all of them out. But you might even put an extra egg white in to get the moisture that you need for that product. And the result's actually good because egg whites are a leavening agent. They make the product rise. Think of angel food cake, which is all egg whites. So you put extra egg white in that product. It's still really good. It's nice and fluffy. I made pancakes that way one time, and they were really good. Nice, soft, fluffy pancakes. So limiting your egg yolks is one thing that you can do. It's fairly simple unless you're one of those people that eats 2 or 3 eggs every day. Does anybody in here still eat lots of eggs? That's what they did back on the farm a long time ago. Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind that's pretty obvious to most of you is that you don't want to eat animal fat, and that would be like lard. I bet everybody here knows where lard comes from. Sometimes I go into school systems and I have to explain to the kids that you get lard from hogs. And years ago, they used it for everything. Where did they put lard?
All your food.
Yeah, it was put in the biscuits, the pie crust, the cakes. They fried with it. They seasoned with it. It was found in everything. Matter of fact, my great-grandparents did kill their own hogs. You wait until everyone is cold so the meat doesn't spoil. Cut off that fat, put it in a big black kettle, build a fire underneath it, and it's called rendering the fat, right? And then when they quit killing their own hogs, we took them to the grocery store to buy lard. And they bought 5-gallon containers. Do you remember those? It's like the bucket that you use to wash the car with. It was a big container of lard. You don't find it like that anymore because we know that lard's not a good product. It's kind of hard to even find these small containers of it. But lard is considered a saturated fat, which means that about 51% of this product is bad fat. Saturated is the bad fat that clogs the arteries. So just keep that number in mind. Now, my mother started using shortening a long time ago. And Mother was the old-fashioned cook, again, that she would measure out with her hand. And she used this, again, in the biscuits. And she put it in everything that she fried and all those cakes and things. Now you notice that this is a very old container. You're wondering why I didn't update my product. Well, the reason is this dates back to pre-labeling laws, and I wanted to remind you how they used to mislead us on the labels. This product has in print there that you can barely make out anymore, no cholesterol. So the implication in the marketing is that this product is much better than lard because it doesn't contain cholesterol. And that was true. Remember that you only get cholesterol from animal products. We as humans manufacture cholesterol, and all the animals do as well. So this doesn't have any cholesterol in it, but it has been changed in the laboratory. It's a chemical process called hydrogenation. And what we learned in chemistry classes is that means that hydrogen atoms were added to this product. So it's now what I refer to in layman's terms as man-made bad. They have changed it from a liquid texture, from the oils that contain, to a solid. And that tells you it's very much like the saturated fat of lard. Now, I can hardly make this out anymore, but the description of it was always kind of misleading too. It said that Crisco is made from the finest vegetable oils, and it said in parentheses what those were. And they were soybean, palm, and one other kind of oil that were partially hydrogenated for freshness and consistency. Now you read that and it sounds really nice, doesn't it? Like they've really done us a favor. But if you know chemistry, that word hydrogenated tells you that they didn't really do us any favors. They changed this to a solid, so now it's almost as bad, if not as bad, as lard. Now I have to admit there are some products that you just have to use something of this texture to get the results that you want. For example, a decorator frosting for a cake. You know, if you're doing that type of thing, then you probably still want to use this. I do use shortening occasionally, but usually a container this size goes bad long before I use it up. It's just that rare occasion when it calls for that type of consistency to make the product turn out right. So occasionally is okay. It's when we use it every day, like my mom did, that it could be a problem. Another fat that a lot of people use, and sometimes they're not even aware that they're using it because it's one of those hidden ingredients in products, is coconut oil. And here are a couple examples of foods that contain coconut oil. This is non-dairy creamer, and this is Cool Whip whipped topping. If you ever put Cool Whip on top of your hot chocolate and it dissolved and you saw the little oil slick floating around on top of your hot chocolate, that's what that was. That was coconut oil. Years ago, when this became a popular subject, people knew that coconut oil wasn't good for them, they took it out of some of the non-dairy creamers. And one day I was shopping and I noticed that they called this Coffee Mate the original. A little light bulb went on in my mind. I thought, wonder what that means. And sure enough, they put the coconut oil back in that. That's what that was referring to. Again, if you don't use very much of this and you only drink coffee on a rare occasion, no problem. But if you're drinking a pot of coffee every day and you're putting a big heaping teaspoon of this in there, it could make a difference. Why is coconut oil bad? There's no cholesterol in it. It comes from a plant. But it is 87 to 94% saturated fat. We said lard was only 51%, so it's almost twice as bad. Now there's a lot of coconut oil that you can find in grocery stores, and it's very solid. It's even harder than this, but it has all kinds of claims of it being healthy and good for you because it doesn't have cholesterol in it. So what they're not telling you is it does have a lot of saturated fat. And I was looking at that label trying to understand it just recently, and I think out of 14 grams of fat, 12 of it was saturated fat. But see, the layman person might not realize that that's not a good thing. Also used to find coconut oil in other products that were kind of hidden, and this is another example of it, a hot chocolate mix. Since the hot chocolate mix is usually made from non-fat dry milk, that's fat-free, and it's used with cocoa, and cocoa is basically fat-free. So why would they have coconut oil in there? Well, we like a creamy texture to our food. So you put a little coconut oil in there, it gives it that creamy texture, and coconut oil has a longer shelf life, so it doesn't go rancid as quickly as animal fats. So that was one of the reasons they would put it in products like this. One of my favorite labels is the popcorn. And this is something you might get at a concession stand, used to be at the movie theaters or the ballparks. And the ingredients listed are popcorn, salt, and edible oil. Well, we're so glad they didn't put motor oil in our popcorn, but it didn't tell you what the oil was. In almost all cases, it was coconut oil. Having had 3 kids and worked a lot of concession stands, I experienced a lot of guilt when I served popcorn and seeing that I was making it with coconut oil. So when you like that popcorn, just keep in mind that may be what you're liking about it, the way it tastes. You also get animal fat or saturated fat, cholesterol, from dairy products unless it's been removed. Now this is the milk that most of us were raised on. This is whole milk. And this one little 8-ounce serving has 8 grams of fat. That's about the equivalent of 1.5 teaspoons of butter or fat. 1.5 in that one serving. So the dairy industry tells us their most popular product, their best seller, is 2% milk. And a lot of people think that's a whole lot better. Well, the fat content of 2% milk is 5 grams. So it's still a teaspoon. It's only 3 grams less than the whole milk. So that's why I'm not recommending that you drink 2% milk. Do you remember when it was called low fat? A lot of people refer to it as that. That implied it was a lot better for you. Use low fat milk. It wasn't really low fat. And when we came out with those labeling laws I talked about earlier, where they defined what low fat was, they can't call it low fat because it's not. They have to call it reduced fat. So that's when you saw the change of the name on it. To be low fat, it has to be 3 grams or less per serving. This is still 5 grams. So that the recommendation that I give to you is to use fat-free milk. It used to be called skim milk. Now they refer to it mostly as fat-free milk. Fat-free milk doesn't have any fat in it. It's negligible, 0. Then a lot of you are probably thinking, oh, but that looks different. That's diluted. It's watered down looking. A lot of people call it Blue John. My farmers like to tell me that's what they fed to their hogs years ago. So a lot of criticism. Basically what's going on here is that we are all, as humans, creatures of habit. And if you've been drinking whole milk, you're used to the appearance of that. You're used to that taste and that look. Because of the fat that's in there, it's a lot whiter. It's a creamier texture. So if you're used to that and you're served this, you notice the difference. If you're, however, used to this, you will think of it with nicer adjectives. It might be delicate or light looking. And this will look thick and slimy and disgusting. And you can taste the fat in it. It tastes kind of a rancid, overpowering taste. So it's just what you're used to. I would suggest if you're still drinking whole milk, go to 2% first. Give yourself time to get used to that. Then work your way on down to 1% or the fat-free milk. If you're still not convinced, however, there is another option for you. This is a fat-free milk that doesn't taste or look like it. It's called Fat-Free Deluxe or Fat-Free Plus, depending on the brand, how they label it. And that little extra word on the end tells you that this product, even though it's fat-free, is a little whiter and a little creamier texture because they add some other ingredients back to it, like natural milk ingredients, some whey, for example. So this might be an easier transition for you to get to fat-free milk. Still has, a lot of people used to think that if you got fat-free milk, you were missing out on nutrients, and that's really not true at all. When you take the fat out of that product, then you've got a little more room in that container, that 8-ounce container, for more protein, more calcium, and you still have all the vitamins and minerals. So you actually might be even better off with the fat-free milk for that reason alone. So you can make those choices in getting less fat. Obviously, since cholesterol comes from animal products, it's going to be found in your meats. So we as dietitians are going to recommend that you use the white meats more often, which would be chicken and turkey. And it's the white meat of the chicken and turkey, not the dark meat. The dark meat, you might say, is more moist. That's because of the fat that's contained in it. So it's the white meat. And it also should not be fried. In the South, of course, when you eat chicken and fish, it's always fried. So if you eat more grilled, and this is true even when you go to a restaurant, if you get fried chicken, I've talked about that in fast foods, you're still getting a lot of fat. But if you get the grilled chicken, it's a much better choice. This, again, is the serving size as well. So if you do decide to have red meat, I want you to be sure to look at that meat and think about the selection. Usually the less expensive choices are the leaner choices. Choice looks like this, and then prime, or think of prime rib, or what's the ribeye that's so popular. The reason that people like that because it's tender and juicy. What makes it tender and juicy is all that fat. Now, a real good choice when you go to a restaurant is the filet mignon. Filet mignon is very tender, it's not dried out, and yet it's very lean, so that would be a better choice. So I'm not telling you can't have red meat or that I wouldn't recommend red meat, but I would suggest that you stay with a 3-ounce serving size. So this is what 3 ounces looks like. In our country, again, it's not just a calorie issue. We like the 16-ounce T-bones and the 8-ounce ribeyes and the 2-inch pork chops, and that's just excess meat, protein, and fat and cholesterol. So get your portions small, and then you can still have some red meat on occasions. What about products like bologna and hot dogs? What's this? What is this?
Fat.
Yeah, what's it made from? besides fat?
Byproducts.
Yes, yes, yeah. We don't even want to talk about it, do we? I've had some of my patients as had been employees in companies that made products like this, and when they get through describing it, you never eat it again. It is everything. One person said it's everything but the snout and the nails. Made from a lot of organ meat. Anything that can't be used as lean meat or sold as lean meat is ground up, put with a lot of salt, which we talked about last time, and sold at a better price. So a lot of people think they're getting a real good deal when they buy the Lonin hot dogs. If you consider spending your money on fat and salt, a good product, then you're getting a deal. Better choices for sandwiches would be turkey, chicken, and you can buy all this stuff, and it just can be just as easy as hamburger or bologna and hot dogs. What about some of the canned products? This one's called potted meat. Did you ever read the ingredients on these products? This one says it's made from beef tripe, pork stomach, beef heart. Kind of get the idea. It's not your choice meat. This is another product that contains coconut oil. A lot of the manufacturers of bakery goods took the coconut oil out. For some reason, that one was not out when I bought that. And you can tell I've had it for a while, but still had the coconut oil in it. Another fat that's more saturated is palm oil. And you find that sometimes, and the coconut as well, in things like crackers. I used to find it in cereals. Guess which cereals had the coconut oil in them? The children's cereals. Isn't that great that we're feeding our children things like that? Vienna sausage, also not only full of salt, but also fat. So again, read the labels and just become aware of what you're eating. If you only eat it once every 3 months, not a problem. But if you're eating that every day for your lunch, because it's quick and easy, I wouldn't recommend it. So we've talked about the not so good side of the table. Let's talk about the better choices, because there are a lot of good things that you can have. And again, white meats of chicken, fish, turkey, lean beef, and lean pork. Some people think you can't have pork at all. Pork tenderloin is a very lean cut and very good, so you might have that one. And especially for breakfast, since I'm not recommending bacon and sausage, then you might have a little slice of that for your breakfast meat if you require that. Dried beans and peas are an excellent source of soluble fiber. All fruits and vegetables are really good sources of fiber, both soluble and insoluble. But soluble fiber helps to lower the cholesterol. So for those of you who love the dried beans and peas, whether it's white beans or pinto beans or peas of any type, that's a good choice. But what's the problem with that? Yeah, how do we season these things in the South? You know, we put our ham hock in it and our bacon grease. So again, if you season it differently, it would still be better. I've had people eat my food and I season with margarine. That's what I prefer to use instead of oil and no meat grease. And they expect not to like it. And they keep saying, are you sure there's no meat in here? Are you sure there's no pork in there? Because it is still good. And I felt foolish the first time I tried seasoning with margarine instead of the meat grease that my mom taught me to cook with. And it was still good. And I thought, why have I been using grease all these years? It still tastes really good. And I like to use things like onions and garlic, seasonings and things like that in the food. It still makes it really tasty. As I said before, cocoa is all right to use because most of the fat is removed. Chocolate, unfortunately, does have some saturated fat in it, and there's a debate on how bad it is, but there is cocoa butter, which is somewhat saturated fat. If you're a peanut butter fan, this is the type of peanut butter that I'd recommend that you use. What do you think's wrong with my peanut butter? A lot of people see this in the grocery store and they think it's been there too long and it's spoiled and the oil is separated out. This is actually natural peanut butter. This is what peanut butter would look like if you prepared it yourself. You grind the peanuts, the pulp settles to the bottom, the oil rises to the top. Peanut oil is a monounsaturated fat. Now, of the fats, we have saturated, unsaturated, and mono. And monounsaturated turns out to be the better fat. If you use a lot of polyunsaturated fat, like corn oil, safflower, sunflower, cottonseed, and sesame seed oil, it actually can bring down your HDL, that good cholesterol. So we started recommending that people use the monounsaturated fats like canola oil and olive oil. And then third would be peanut oil. So if you bought peanut butter that did this, that would be natural peanut butter and the peanut oil is not bad for you. What most of us have used over the years, someone decided a long time ago that peanut butter was just a lot of bother because you had to stir it up. And it was kind of hard to spread on that bread. So they would do something to it to make it spread easier and not separate like that. What do you think they did to it?
Add grease.
They added lard. Yes, they added lard and they hydrogenated it so it wouldn't separate. So they made it a saturated fat, although naturally it was not. So if you're using peanut butter once in a blue moon, I wouldn't worry about it. But if you eat it every day, like my son did when he came home from school every day, then it would behoove you to use a lower fat peanut butter or the natural. So those are a couple of choices you have. Some people will put this in the refrigerator to keep it from separating or set it upside down. It does make a little difference as far as having to stir it. I had one friend that would pour off the oil, but then it is very thick. It's more like a chunk. Now, what are the better fats to use? We mentioned the oils. Also, a margarine that has no trans fats would be a good choice. Remember, when it comes to fat, the more liquid it is, the better it is. So liquid margarine would be your first choice, and real soft tub margarines would be your second choice. And then stick margarines, there's just a few I'd recommend. You want there to be at least a 2-to-1 ratio of good fat to bad fat. So that means if there's 2 grams of saturated fat per serving, you want there to be at least 4 grams of unsaturated fat. So this one is called Brummel & Brown. It's made from yogurt, and it even has less calories than some of the other margarines, so that would be another plus too. And this is the liquid tub or liquid margarine, and again it says no trans fats. So a couple of good choices. Another place that we get a lot of fat in our diets, and remember a low cholesterol diet, for someone to lower their cholesterol, you also want to use less fat. You know, it helps to bring your cholesterol down if you're not only using healthy fats, but less fat. So I recommend no more than 50 to 60 grams of fat per day. If you're having salads, and I've mentioned this before, you get a lot of calories when you pour all that salad dressing on it. So you might use a fat-free salad dressing, or you might use one of the spritzers, and both of these would be low fat and have a nice, delightful taste for your salad. This is also a great marinade for that chicken. Instead of frying the chicken, you can marinate it in a fat-free Italian dressing and throw it on the grill. It's really good. Nice and easy. You remember, too, that us Southern cooks think you have to put a lot of fat in the bottom of that skillet to keep food from sticking. So you might try using a nonstick skillet and a spray like Pam, or this is the Walmart version of Pam. Keeps the food from sticking. It still can taste fried. Matter of fact, you can fix that egg in this. Still, it's a fried egg, but you didn't add any fat. You definitely can cook it in bacon grease. And I think that brings us to the end of I've got a few more props here. Butter Buds is another product that a lot of people like to use, and I can't believe it's not butter. These are both fat-free products that taste buttery, but they have no calories, they have no fat, so it's a good way to season when you're trying to cut back on fat and you still want a good taste. These products are really good. They also make fat-free cream cheese, fat-free sour cream, fat-free yogurts, fat-free frozen yogurt. Those products still taste good. At one time, if you said fat-free, people thought that meant bad quality and tastes awful. It's not true anymore. Matter of fact, frozen yogurt is one of my favorites. Nice creamy texture, but no fat and less calories. And then we mentioned also you can get the healthier versions of lunch meats. So, does anybody have any questions? How many of you are already doing a lot of these things? You've already changed some of the ways you're eating. Good, good. So keep track of that cholesterol. There are some special margarines, too, that are like Benecol and Take Control that have had extra ingredients added to them. They're called plant stanols and sterols, and that's thought to bring the cholesterol down just a little bit, too. So some little easy things you can do that might prevent you from going on medication. And then remember to exercise, because that also helps that HDL. Well, thank you very much for your time and interest today.